Hi everyone, I prepared this small demonstration to explain a customer who wants to store user sessions in Redis Enterprise managed in Google Cloud from an application deployed in Google CloudRun. The application is written in Python with FastAPI. Okay, so the first step is to create a Python application with FastAPI and to expose it. So I will first create a folder. Then I will create a virtual environment. I will deploy FastAPI, then I will deploy application server, and I will write the application code. So here it is. It is quite simple. I have a data model. I will store my records in an internal table. Then I will expose it with FastAPI on two endpoints. The first one to read and the second one to get. So that's all for the application. I will but I'm already in here, so I can just start the application. From that point, I can try to get a first record, which should be empty, of course, internal error. Then what I can do is I can write a new record. So I will use a put call to write a data, and I can read it now. Of course, I can also use the Swagger interface. Here it is. So I can get the first one. I can see my record, and I can create a new record. Let's say the record 2 with the default values. I create it, and then I can, for example, read it from the command line. Here it is. So now that I have an application which is storing the data in memory, I can continue. Now we can make this application use Redis instead of storing the data in memory. So for that, I can edit my application, which is quite simple currently. I will remove all of that, and I will replace it with a new code which is more or less the same, with very few differences. So the difference is that I use the Redis library, then I connect to the Redis database, then I pre-populate with some data, and regarding the endpoints, I read the data from Redis, and I store the data in Redis. I comment the internal storage. So now, to use it, I need to explain where to find the Redis database, and I will start a Redis database. Now it is started, so I can start the application. I forgot to install the Redis library. Here it is. I can start the application, and then my application is available. So what I can do is I can, for example, try to get all the informations using the REST API. So I iterate, I find the first, the second, the third record, and nothing in the fourth. And I can use, let's say, the Swagger interface to create a fourth record with the default values. I can execute it, and here I have it here. of course, everything is stored in Redis. When I started the Docker container, it includes not only Redis but also a Redis client, RedisInsight, which is exposed on port 8001, so I can connect to this one, and then I can see the records, the first, the second, the third record that I created from the code, and the fourth record that I created using the REST interface. Okay, so I was using Redis open source, but given that I want to execute my application CloudRun, I want to use managed Redis service, so I want to use Redis Enterprise. And I can also use Redis Enterprise in my local developer workstation. So first, I will stop the Redis open source container, and I will start a Redis Enterprise container. So it is currently started, and from that point I need to configure it. So for that I will open a new connection on the Redis Enterprise interface. I will create a new cluster with a default administrator. It is. Then I have to give it a name, a cluster name, and I create it. It is created, it will generate a new certificate, so I will have to refresh my window. Okay, so I can accept and refresh. So now I can connect. Then I can create a database. I will create a quick database. I don't care about the port, about anything. I need to have the module enabled. So I create this new database. This database is created. I have an endpoint to connect to this database. So from that point, what I can do is I can update the configuration variables. That way, and restart the application. The application is now connected to the database, to the Redis Enterprise database. I can see it in the metrics. Here I can see that I should see, yes, it is, that I have 3 keys in my database. Okay, fine. Now what I can do is that I can connect to RedisInsight. So for that I will start RedisInsight. And I will connect my database. I will use the information that I had here in the configuration. Here it is. Can add it. Now I have my database, and I can see that I have, I will just zoom a little bit. I can see that I have my created users here. And I can also use the Swagger interface. It is, I will put a new user, the 4th one with the default values as usual. I created it and it should be available here. It is. So I can connect very transparently the same way to Redis Enterprise instead of Redis open source. So I have the exact same stack in my computer than the stack that will be deployed in production. Okay, so now we have an application which is running and which is using Redis Enterprise in a Docker container. So the next step is to package the application, to have it contained in a Docker container so that it can be deployed in production exactly the same way. So it will, in production, we will have a Redis Enterprise cluster with a database available as a service, as a managed service, and we will have a Docker container with our application, which will be run by Google CloudRun. So first, I stop my application, and the first step is to package the application, and for that I need to prepare a Docker container with some prerequisites. So I list all the Python packages that I need in a file. Then I can edit a Docker file to actually build the Docker container. And well, I'm lazy. I'm based on Google CloudRun samples. So here is the content. And oh yes, excuse me, it was too fast. So here is the content, and I just changed from G-Unicorn to Uvicorn because I used this one. Up. And then finally we need to exclude some files from the packaging, so I will list them here. So these are files which don't need to be in the package, and I finally need to build the Docker container. So currently, see, if I list the images, I don't have it, but I will build it. It's quite fast. It creates a container, it installs the dependencies, and that's done. It is available. So now if I list my images, I have it. So once I have it, I can start it using a simple Docker command. As you can see, I expose the 8000 port to have the web interface. And then I use same Redis host, my Redis Enterprise cluster, and the same port. I also prepared this variable for the password, but I don't use it currently. And well, I expose the web. And that's all. I can start it. My Docker container started, and I should have it available here. So if I refresh my Swagger interface, it works. So I have it. In RedisInsight, I still have my database, and it has only 4 records, so that's fine. I can go back to my Swagger interface and create a new record. So I am using the application which is deployed in a Docker container. It works. It received the REST API call, and did it create a new user here? Yes, indeed, it created it. So now I have something which is very, very similar to my production environment, to my target. I have a Redis Enterprise cluster with a Redis Enterprise database, which are managed, well, in my case, in Docker locally. And I also have my application packaged, ready to be deployed in Google CloudRun. Okay, so the next part is how to create a Redis Enterprise database managed in Google Cloud to host the data for our FastAPI application. So the first step is to go to the portal and to connect. So the portal is app.redislabs.com. Then you can create an account. I already have one. You can sign on with an account or with a single sign-on with Okta, with GitHub also. Then, once you are in the portal, you can have access to several things, and you can create a new subscription. A subscription is more or less a cluster. You can choose a flexible plan, which gives you some flexibility. Then choose to host your database in Google Cloud. Choose the region in which you will deploy the cluster. So I choose Europe, and then you can give the cluster a name. So I call it François. I won't change any other option. I will keep everything by default. Once the cluster is defined, I have to define databases. It will be used to size the cluster. So my first database will be called FastAPI, and I will enable the JSON on the search module. Everything else is by default. I can enable or disable high availability, for example, or persistency. Then I can ask to check all the values, and finally validate to create the new subscription with the database. It can take few minutes to create it. I will skip this time. And once it's done, you will see your subscription and your database. Now I have my FastAPI database in my subscription. Everything is ready to be used. I can open the database to check the connection help. So I can use Redis client to have some code samples in Python, for example. That's the code I used in my application. You can choose another language. You can choose also between private and public endpoints. A private endpoint is only available from inside Google Cloud, and a public endpoint is published on the internet. It's a choice. You can enable or disable the public endpoint. Then you have the same command, the same connection string for the command line client, either with the private endpoint or the public endpoint. And finally, you can also use RedisInsight to connect to your database. So I am on my workstation, so I need the public endpoint, and I use RedisInsight. Then I am connected to the new database in the subscription. As you can see, I have the endpoint here, and then I can browse my data, but currently I don't have any data in the database. Okay, so I have my database, then I can check the configuration and use the public endpoint from my workstation, from my local application, to connect to the managed database. So in this case, I will update the environment variables to reflect the endpoint settings, public endpoint settings, so the name and the port of this endpoint. So here is the port, I use it, and now I will set the host. And given that it is a cloud database, I also need a password, because by default there is a password on all the hosted, all the managed databases. So I need to set the Redis PaaS environment variable and to use it later in my application. So I can go to the subscription user interface. I can just cut and paste the password. I don't need to see it. And now I can restart my application, my Dockerized application. Oh, I forgot something. I need to use the password, but I forgot to tell the application to use the password environment variable. So I need to add this in the code, so I need to set the password for the connection and use the Redis PaaS environment variable. And then once I did that, I have to rebuild my Docker image. It will be quite fast. So I first delete it and then I rebuild. Okay, so I rebuilt my Docker image with the application, the new application version, which uses Redis PaaS as a password, and I give it all the environment variables on the command line, as you can see. And then on my database I should have at least the 3 keys which are created by my application when it starts. So I can use the monitoring tab of this database and I can check that I have 3 keys. Fine, so it means that my application managed to connect to my managed database. So I can check also in RedisInsight to see the actual data which is stored in the database, and I can use the Swagger user interface to create a new user, a new record in this database. It seems that it worked, and let's check. I should have 4 keys. It has to refresh. In the meantime, I can check that I have the data using RedisInsight. I can see that my new record was added to the database. I have the first one. Okay, so now I have an application which runs in a Docker container, and which can connect to Redis open source locally in a Docker container, to Redis Enterprise locally in a Docker container, to Redis Enterprise managed in Google Cloud. So now the next step is to publish our Docker container application in CloudRun. So for that, it's quite simple. I need to first stop my application, and then I will ask Google, the Google command line tool, to push it. But before, I have to check the application code. Here, I did not change anything. It will work exactly the same on my local machine and in Google Cloud. So let's compile it, create the image. So basically this command, I could ask Google Cloud to create an image and store the image in Google Cloud Artifact Factory. But I won't do that. I will compile the image and immediately deploy it. So I compile the image from the source folder in which I am currently. Then I will tell the service, the FastAPI service in CloudRun, to be started and to listen on this port and with a specific account. Then I give it also the environment variables to connect to the Redis database, the managed Redis database, and I deploy it in a project. This step takes few seconds. So in the meantime, while it is building the image from the sources, I can check in Google CloudRun that currently, I can refresh, I have no such service as FastAPI. It will be created on the fly by the command. I'm sorry, the interface is in French, but well, basically you have the same in English. Let's wait for the image to be created and deployed. Okay, so it seems to be ready. I can check here in the CloudRun interface. I have my service, which is started, so I can check it. Everything seems to be fine. It looks like okay. So I can just test the provided endpoint. So this is the endpoint. I will use it in my browser. So here it is. The endpoint by itself is empty because my application doesn't have anything on this endpoint, so I just have to add docs. So I add it. Now I can find my Swagger interface. I can try to get the record 1, for example. Let's check. I have record 1. I have record 2. I think I should have also record 3. Let's check. 3 is here. Okay. 4. It should not exist. Let's check. No, it doesn't exist. Okay, so we can create it if we need it. So I will create a 4th record. Let's create it. 4th, and it will be François. Okay. Did it work? Yes, it worked. I can check here if my record is now here. Yes, François is returned by my microservice. So fine, from Swagger it works. How does it look like in the Redis managed Redis Enterprise managed console? Currently I have only 3 keys. It will be refreshed in few seconds. It is refreshed on a daily basis. Okay, so now I have 4 keys. So obviously my key is here. Okay, so it seems to be fine. And I have my service available here, highly available. I can have an auto-scaling on my CloudRun API, but I can also have scalability on Redis Enterprise with high availability and all the features, modules, and so on. And let's check also here in my RedisInsight. I should have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I will refresh. 4 and 4 is François. Okay, so everything works. I have a scalable application. I can change my code here, run it locally, run it in a Docker container, run it in Google CloudRun, and it can use a local Dockerized Redis open source, a local Dockerized Redis Enterprise, a remote Redis Enterprise, either managed or not. In my case, it was managed, so everything is managed, and I can do it in few lines, in few seconds. Thank you. Have a nice day.